Cryptographic hash function. A cryptographic hash function, CHF, is a mathematical algorithm that maps data of arbitrary size, often called the message, to a bit array of a fixed size, the hash value, hash, or message digest. It is a one-way function, that is, a function which is practically infeasible to invert or reverse the computation. 1. Ideally, the only way to find a message that produces a given hash is to attempt a brute force search of possible inputs to see if they produce a match, or use a rainbow table of matched hashes. Cryptographic hash functions are a basic tool of modern cryptography. The ideal cryptographic hash function has the following main properties. It is deterministic, meaning that the same message always results in the same hash. It is quick to compute the hash value for any given message. It is infeasible to generate a message that yields a given hash value, i.e. to reverse the process that generated the given hash value. It is infeasible to find two different messages with the same hash value. A small change to a message should change the hash value so extensively that a new hash value appears uncorrelated with the old hash value. Avalanche effect. 2. Cryptographic hash functions have many information security applications, notably in digital signatures, message authentication codes, MACs, and other forms of authentication. They can also be used as ordinary hash functions, to index data in hash tables, for fingerprinting, to detect duplicate data or uniquely identify files, and as checksums to detect accidental data corruption. Indeed, in information security contexts, cryptographic hash values are sometimes called digital fingerprints, checksums, or just hash values, even though all these terms stand for more general functions with rather different properties and purposes. Contents. Properties, edit. Most cryptographic hash functions are designed to take a string of any length as input and produce a fixed length hash value. A cryptographic hash function must be able to withstand all known types of cryptanalytic attack. In theoretical cryptography, the security level of a cryptographic hash function has been defined using the following properties. Pre-image resistance. Given a hash value h, it should be difficult to find any message m such that h equals hash m. This concept is related to that of a one-way function. Functions that lack this property are vulnerable to pre-image attacks. Second, pre-image resistance. Given an input m1, it should be difficult to find a different input m2 such that hash m1 equals hash m2. This property is sometimes referred to as weak collision resistance. Functions that lack this property are vulnerable to second pre-image attacks. Collision resistance. It should be difficult to find two different messages m1 and m2 such that hash m1 equals hash m2. Such a pair is called a cryptographic hash collision. This property is sometimes referred to as strong collision resistance. It requires a hash value at least twice as long as that required for pre-image resistance, otherwise collisions may be found by a birthday attack. 4. Collision resistance implies second pre-image resistance but does not imply pre-image resistance. 5. The weaker assumption is always preferred in theoretical cryptography, but in practice, a hash function which is only second pre-image resistant is considered insecure and is therefore not recommended for real applications. Informally, these properties mean that a malicious adversary cannot replace or modify the input data without changing its digest. Thus, if two strings have the same digest, one can be very confident that they are identical. Second pre-image resistance prevents an attacker from crafting a document with the same hash as a document the attacker cannot control. Collision resistance prevents an attacker from creating two distinct documents with the same hash. A function meeting these criteria may still have undesirable properties. Currently popular cryptographic hash functions are vulnerable to length extension attacks, given hash m and len m, but not m. By choosing a suitable m, an attacker can calculate hash where denotes concatenation. 6. This property can be used to break naive authentication schemes based on hash functions. The HMAC construction works around these problems. In practice, collision resistance is insufficient for many practical uses. In addition to collision resistance, it should be impossible for an adversary to find two messages with substantially similar digests, or to infer any useful information about the data, given only its digest. In particular, a hash function should behave as much as possible like a random function, often called a random oracle in proofs of security, while still being deterministic and efficiently computable. This rules out functions like the SWIFT function, which can be rigorously proven to be collision-resistant assuming that certain problems on ideal lattices are computationally difficult, but, as a linear function, does not satisfy these additional properties. 7. Checksum algorithms, such as CRC32 and other cyclic redundancy checks, are designed to meet much weaker requirements and are generally unsuitable as cryptographic hash functions. For example, a CRC was used for message integrity in the WEP encryption standard, but an attack was readily discovered, which exploited the linearity of the checksum. Degree of difficulty, edit. In cryptographic practice, difficult generally means almost certainly beyond the reach of any adversary who must be prevented from breaking the system for as long as the security of the system is deemed important. The meaning of the term is therefore somewhat dependent on the application, since the effort that a malicious agent may put into the task is usually proportional to their expected gain. However, since the needed effort usually multiplies with the digest length, even a 1,000-fold advantage in processing power can be neutralized by adding a few dozen bits to the latter. For messages selected from a limited set of messages, for example passwords or other short messages, it can be feasible to invert a hash by trying all possible messages in the set. Because cryptographic hash functions are typically designed to be computed quickly, special key derivation functions that require greater computing resources have been developed that make such brute force attacks more difficult. In some theoretical analyses, difficult has a specific mathematical meaning, such as not solvable in asymptotic polynomial time. Such interpretations of difficulty are important in the study of provably secure cryptographic hash functions but do not usually have a strong connection to practical security. For example, an exponential time algorithm can sometimes still be fast enough to make a feasible attack. Conversely, a polynomial time algorithm, example, one that requires n20 steps for n-digit keys, may be too slow for any practical use. Illustration, An illustration of the potential use of a cryptographic hash is as follows. Alice poses a tough math problem to Bob and claims that she has solved it. Bob would like to try it himself, but would yet like to be sure that Alice is not bluffing. Therefore, Alice writes down her solution, computes its hash, and tells Bob the hash value, whilst keeping the solution secret. Then, when Bob comes up with the solution himself a few days later, Alice can prove that she had the solution earlier by revealing it and having Bob hash it and check that it matches the hash value given to him before. This is an example of a simple commitment scheme. In actual practice, Alice and Bob will often be computer programs, and the secret would be something less easily spoofed than a claimed puzzle solution. Applications, edit. Verifying the integrity of messages and files, edit. Main article, file verification. An important application of secure hashes is the verification of message integrity. Comparing message digests, hash digests over the message, calculated before and after transmission can determine whether any changes have been made to the message or file. MD5, SHA-1, or SHA-2 hash digests are sometimes published on websites or forums to allow verification of integrity for downloaded files, 8, including files retrieved using file sharing such as mirroring. This practice establishes a chain of trust as long as the hashes are posted on a trusted site, usually the originating site, authenticated by HTTPS. Using a cryptographic hash and a chain of trust detects malicious changes to the file. Other error-detecting codes such as cyclic redundancy checks only prevent against non-malicious alterations of the file made by others. Signature generation and verification, edit. Main HTML element HTML element reference. HTML tags ordered alphabetically. Tag. Description. Dash, dash. Defines a comment. Doc type. Defines the document type. Defines a hyperlink. Abbreviation. Defines an abbreviation or an acronym. Acronym. Not supported in HTML5. Use abbreviation instead. Defines an acronym. Address. Defines contact information for the author/owner of a document. Applet. Not supported in HTML5. Use embed or object instead. Defines an embedded applet. Area. Defines an area inside an image map. Article. Defines an article. Aside. Defines content aside from the page content. Audio. Defines embedded sound content. B. Defines bold text. Base. Specifies the base URL target for all relative URLs in a document. Base font. Not supported in HTML5. Use CSS instead. Specifies a default color, size, and font for all text in a document. B. Isolates a part of text that might be formatted in a different direction from other text outside it. BDO. Overrides the current text direction. Big. Not supported in HTML5. Use CSS instead. Defines big text. Block quote. Defines a section that is quoted from another source. Body. Defines the document's body. BR. Defines a single line break. Button. Defines a clickable button. Canvas. Used to draw graphics on the fly via scripting, usually JavaScript. Caption. Defines a table caption. Center. Not supported in HTML5. Use CSS instead. Defines centered text. Cite. Defines the title of a work. Code. Defines a piece of computer code. Col. Specifies column properties for each column within a call group element. Call group. Specifies a group of one or more columns in a table for formatting. Data. Adds a machine-readable translation of a given content. Data list. Specifies a list of predefined options for input controls. DD. Defines a description value of a term in a description list. Del. Defines text that has been deleted from a document. Details. Defines additional details that the user can view or hide. DFN. Specifies a term that is going to be defined within the content. Dialog. Defines a dialog box or window. DIR. Not supported in HTML5. Use EUL instead. Defines a directory list. Div. Defines a section in a document. DL. Defines a description list. DT. Defines a term name in a description list. M. Defines emphasized text. Embed. Defines a container for an external application. Field set. Groups related elements in a form. Fig caption. Defines a caption for a figure element. Figure. Specifies self-contained content. Font. Not supported in HTML5. Use CSS instead. Defines font, color, and size for text. Footer. Defines a footer for a document or section. Form. Defines an HTML form for user input. Frame. Not supported in HTML5. Defines a window, a frame, in a frameset. Frameset. Not supported in HTML5. Defines a set of frames. H1 to H6. Defines HTML headings. Head. Contains metadata information for the document. Header. Defines a header for a document or section. Hour. Defines a thematic change in the content. HTML. Defines the root of an HTML document. I. Defines a part of text in an alternate voice or mood. Iframe. Defines an inline frame. IMG. Defines an image. Input. Defines an input control. INS. Defines a text that has been inserted into a document. KBD. Defines keyboard input. Label. Defines a label for an input element. Legend. Defines a caption for a field set element. Li. Defines a list item. Link. Defines the relationship between a document and an external resource, most used to link to style sheets. Main. Specifies the main content of a document. Map. Defines an image map. Mark. Defines marked highlighted text. Meta. Defines metadata about an HTML document. Meter. Defines a scalar measurement within a known range, a gauge. Nav. Defines navigation links. No frames. Not supported in HTML5. Defines an alternate content for users that do not support frames. NoScript. Defines an alternate content for users that do not support client-side scripts. Object. Defines a container for an external application. All. Defines an ordered list. Opt-group. Defines a group of related options in a drop-down list. Option. Defines an option in a drop-down list. Output. Defines the result of a calculation. P. Defines a paragraph. Param. Defines a parameter for an object. Picture. Defines a container for multiple image resources. Pre. Defines preformatted text. Progress. Represents the progress of a task. Q. Defines a short quotation. RP. Defines what to show in browsers that do not support Ruby annotations. RT. Defines an explanation, pronunciation of characters, for East Asian typography. Ruby. Defines a Ruby annotation, for East Asian typography. S. Defines text that is no longer correct. SAMP. Defines sample output from a computer program. Script. Defines a client-side script. Section. Defines a section in a document. Select. Defines a drop-down list. Small. Defines smaller text. Source. Defines multiple media resources for media elements, video, and audio. Span. Defines a section in a document. Strike. Not supported in HTML5. Use del or s instead. Defines strike-through text. Strong. Defines important text. Style. Defines style information for a document. Sub. Defines subscript text. Summary. Defines a visible heading for a details element. Sup. Defines superscript text. SVG. Defines a container for SVG graphics. Table. Defines a table. T-body. Groups the body content in a table. TD. Defines a cell in a table. Template. Defines a container for content that should be hidden when the page loads. Text area. Defines a multiline input control, text area. Tfoot. Groups the footer content in a table. TH. Defines a header cell in a table. Fed. Groups the header content in a table. Time. Defines a specific time, or date time. Title. Defines a title for the document. TR. Defines a row in a table. Track. Defines text tracks for media elements, video, and audio. TT. Not supported in HTML5. Use CSS instead. Defines teletype text. U. Defines some text that is unarticulated and styled differently from normal text. UL. Defines an unordered list. var. Defines a variable. Video. Defines embedded video content. WBR. Defines a possible line break. CSS reference. CSS properties. Align content. Specifies the alignment between the lines inside a flexible container when the items do not use all available space. Align items. Specifies the alignment for items inside a flexible container. Align self. Specifies the alignment for selected items inside a flexible container. All. Resets all properties, except Unicode BD and direction. Animation. A shorthand property for all the animation * properties. Animation delay. Specifies a delay for the start of an animation. Animation direction. Specifies whether an animation should be played forwards, backwards, or in alternate cycles. Animation duration. Specifies how long an animation should take to complete one cycle. Animation fill mode. Specifies a style for the element when the animation is not playing, before it starts, after it ends, or both. Animation iteration count. Specifies the number of times an animation should be played. Animation name. Specifies a name for the @keyframes animation. Animation play state. Specifies whether the animation is running or paused. Animation timing function. Specifies the speed curve of an animation. B. Backface visibility. Defines whether or not the back face of an element should be visible when facing the user. Background. A shorthand property for all the background * properties. Background attachment. Sets whether a background image scrolls with the rest of the page, or is fixed. Background blend mode. Specifies the blending mode of each background layer, color, image. Background clip. Defines how far the background, color or image, should extend within an element. Background color. Specifies the background color of an element. Background image. Specifies one or more background images for an element. Background origin. Specifies the origin position of a background image. Background position. Specifies the position of a background image. Background repeat. Sets if how a background image will be repeated. Background size. Specifies the size of the background images. Border. A shorthand property for border width, border style and border color. Border bottom. A shorthand property for border bottom width, border bottom style and border bottom color. Border bottom color. Sets the color of the bottom border. Border bottom left radius. Defines the radius of the border of the bottom left corner. Border bottom right radius. Defines the radius of the border of the bottom right corner. Border bottom style. Sets the style of the bottom border. Border bottom width. Sets the width of the bottom border. Border collapse. Sets whether table borders should collapse into a single border or be separated. Border color. Sets the color of the four borders. Border image. A shorthand property for all the border image asterisk properties. Border image outset. Specifies the amount by which the border image area extends beyond the border box. Border image repeat. Specifies whether the border image should be repeated, rounded or stretched. Border image slice. Specifies how to slice the border image. Border image source. Specifies the path to the image to be used as a border. Border image width. Specifies the width of the border image. Border left. A shorthand property for all the border left asterisk properties. Border left color. Sets the color of the left border. Border left style. Sets the style of the left border. Border left width. Sets the width of the left border. Border radius. A shorthand property for the four border asterisk radius properties. Border right. A shorthand property for all the border right asterisk properties. Border right color. Sets the color of the right border. Border right style. Sets the style of the right border. Border right width.
Hope you guys are enjoying this. I just figured that it'd be good to do. It's tech sector info.
Border right width. Sets the width of the right border. Border spacing. Sets the distance between the borders of adjacent cells. Border style. Sets the style of the four borders. Border top. A shorthand property for border top width, border top style and border top color. Border top color. Sets the color of the top border. Border top left radius. Defines the radius of the border of the top left corner. Border top right radius. Defines the radius of the border of the top right corner. Border top style. Sets the style of the top border. Border top width. Sets the width of the top border. Border width. Sets the width of the four borders. Bottom. Sets the element's position from the bottom of its parent element. Box decoration break. Sets the behavior of the background and border of an element at page break, or, for inline elements, at line break. Box shadow. Attaches one or more shadows to an element. Box sizing. Defines how the width and height of an element are calculated, should they include padding and borders, or not. Break after. Specifies whether or not a page, column, or region break should occur after the specified element. Break before. Specifies whether or not a page, column, or region break should occur before the specified element. Break inside. Specifies whether or not a page, column, or region break should occur inside the specified element. C. Caption side. Specifies the placement of a table caption. Caret color. Specifies the color of the cursor, caret, in inputs, text areas, or any element that is editable. At charset. Specifies the character encoding used in the style sheet. Clear. Specifies on which sides of an element floating elements are not allowed to float. Clip. Clips an absolutely positioned element. Color. Sets the color of text. Column count. Specifies the number of columns an element should be divided into. Column fill. Specifies how to fill columns, balanced or not. Column gap. Specifies the gap between the columns. Column rule. A shorthand property for all the column rule asterisk properties. Column rule color. Specifies the color of the rule between columns. Column rule style. Specifies the style of the rule between columns. Column rule width. Specifies the width of the rule between columns. Column span. Specifies how many columns an element should span across. Column width. Specifies the column width. Columns. A shorthand property for column width and column count. Content. Used with the before and after pseudo-elements to insert generated content. Counter increment. Increases or decreases the value of one or more CSS counters. Counter reset. Creates or resets one or more CSS counters. Cursor. Specifies the mouse cursor to be displayed when pointing over an element. D. Direction. Specifies the text direction, writing direction. Display. Specifies how a certain HTML element should be displayed. E. Empty cells. Specifies whether or not to display borders and background on empty cells in a table. F. Filter. Defines effects, e.g. blurring or color shifting, on an element before the element is displayed.
I just wanted to touch on one thought that was on my mind. It has nothing to do with anything. But you know that part of Natural Born Killers where he says love defeats the demon? That is so true.
Displayed. Flex. A shorthand property for the flex grow, flex shrink, and the flex basis properties. Flex basis. Specifies the initial length of a flexible item. Flex direction. Specifies the direction of the flexible items. Flex flow. A shorthand property for the flex direction and the flex wrap properties. Flex grow. Specifies how much the item will grow relative to the rest. Flex shrink. Specifies how the item will shrink relative to the rest. Flex wrap. Specifies whether the flexible items should wrap or not. Float. Specifies whether or not a box should float. Font. A shorthand property for the font style, font variant, font weight, font size, line height, and the font family properties. At font face. A rule that allows websites to download and use fonts other than the web-safe fonts. Font family. Specifies the font family for text. Font feature settings. Allows control over advanced typographic features in OpenType fonts. At font feature values. Allows authors to use a common name in font variant alternate for feature activated differently in OpenType. Font kerning. Controls the usage of the kerning information, how letters are spaced. Font language override. Controls the usage of language-specific glyphs in a typeface. Font size. Specifies the font size of text. Font size adjust. Preserves the readability of text when font fallback occurs. Font stretch. Selects a normal, condensed, or expanded face from a font family. Font style. Specifies the font style for text. Font synthesis. Controls which missing typefaces, bold or italic, may be synthesized by the browser. Font variant specifies whether or not a text should be displayed in a small caps font. Font variant alternates controls the usage of alternate glyphs associated to alternative names defined in at font feature values. Font variant caps controls the usage of alternate glyphs for capital letters. Font variant East Asian controls the usage of alternate glyphs for East Asian scripts, E.G Japanese and Chinese. Font variant ligatures controls which ligatures and contextual forms are used in textual content of the elements it applies to. Font variant numeric controls the usage of alternate glyphs for numbers, fractions, and ordinal markers. Font variant position controls the usage of alternate glyphs of smaller size positioned as superscript or subscript regarding the baseline of the font. Font weight specifies the weight of a font. G. Gap a shorthand property for the row gap and the column gap properties. Grid a shorthand property for the grid template rows, grid template columns, grid template areas, grid auto rows, grid auto columns, and the grid auto flow properties. Grid area either specifies a name for the grid item, or this property is a shorthand property for the grid row start, grid column start, grid row end, and grid column end properties. Grid auto columns specifies a default column size. Grid auto flow specifies how auto-placed items are inserted in the grid. Grid auto rows specifies a default row size. Grid column a shorthand property for the grid column start and the grid column end properties. Grid column end specifies where to end the grid item. Grid column gap specifies the size of the gap between columns. Grid column start specifies where to start the grid item. Grid gap a shorthand property for the grid row gap and grid column gap properties. Grid row a shorthand property for the grid row start and the grid row end properties. Grid row end specifies where to end the grid item. Grid row gap specifies the size of the gap between rows. Grid row start specifies where to start the grid item. Grid template a shorthand property for the grid template rows, grid template columns and grid areas properties. Grid template areas specifies how to display columns and rows using named grid items. Grid template columns specifies the size of the columns and how many columns in a grid layout. Grid template rows specifies the size of the rows in a grid layout. H. Hanging punctuation specifies whether a punctuation character may be placed outside the line box. Height sets the height of an element. Hyphens sets how to split words to improve the layout of paragraphs. I. Image rendering gives a hint to the browser about what aspects of an image are most important to preserve when the image is scaled. At import allows you to import a style sheet into another style sheet. Isolation defines whether an element must create a new stacking content. J. Justify content specifies the alignment between the items inside a flexible container when the items do not use all available space. K. At keyframes specifies the animation code. L. Left specifies the left position of a positioned element. Letter spacing increases or decreases the space between characters in a text. Line break specifies how, if to break lines. Line height sets the line height. List style Sets all the properties for a list in one declaration. List style image. Specifies an image as the list item marker. List style position. Specifies the position of the list item markers, bullet points. List style type. Specifies the type of list item marker. M. Margin. Sets all the margin properties in one declaration. Margin bottom. Sets the bottom margin of an element. Margin left. Sets the left margin of an element. Margin right. Sets the right margin of an element. Margin top. Sets the top margin of an element. Mask. Hides an element by masking or clipping the image at specific places. Mask type. Specifies whether a mask element is used as a luminance or an alpha mask. Max height. Sets the maximum height of an element. Max width. Sets the maximum width of an element. At media. Sets the style rules for different media types, devices, sizes. Minute height. Sets the minimum height of an element. Minute width. Sets the minimum width of an element. Mix blend mode. Specifies how an element's content should blend with its direct parent background. O. Object fit. Specifies how the contents of a replaced element should be fitted to the box established by its used height and width. Object position. Specifies the alignment of the replaced element inside its box. Opacity. Sets the opacity level for an element. Order. Sets the order of the flexible item, relative to the rest. Orphans. Sets the minimum number of lines that must be left at the bottom of a page when a page break occurs inside an element. Outline. A shorthand property for the outline width, outline style, and the outline color properties. Outline color. Sets the color of an outline. Outline offset. Offsets an outline, and draws it beyond the border edge. Outline style. Sets the style of an outline. Outline width. Sets the width of an outline. Overflow. Specifies what happens if content overflows an element's box. Overflow wrap. Specifies whether or not the browser may break lines within words in order to prevent overflow, when a string is too long to fit its containing box. Overflow X. Specifies whether or not to clip the left-right edges of the content, if it overflows the element's content area. Overflow Y. Specifies whether or not to clip the top-bottom edges of the content, if it overflows the element's content area. P. Padding. A shorthand property for all the padding asterisk properties. Padding bottom. Sets the bottom padding of an element. Padding left. Sets the left padding of an element. Padding right. Sets the right padding of an element. Padding top. Sets the top padding of an element. Page break after. Sets the page break behavior after an element. Page break before. Sets the page break behavior before an element. Page break inside. Sets the page break behavior inside an element. Perspective. Gives a 3D positioned element some perspective. Perspective origin. Defines at which position the user is looking at the 3D positioned element. Pointer events. Defines whether or not an element reacts to pointer events. Position. Specifies the type of positioning method used for an element, static, relative, absolute or fixed. Q. Quotes. Sets the type of quotation marks for embedded quotations. R. Resize. Defines if, and how, an element is resizable by the user. Write. specifies the right position of a positioned element. Row gap specifies the gap between the grid rows. S. Scroll behavior specifies whether to smoothly animate the scroll position in a scrollable box instead of a straight jump. T. Tab size specifies the width of a tab character. Table layout defines the algorithm used to lay out table cells, rows, and columns. Text align specifies the horizontal alignment of text. Text align last describes how the last line of a block or a line right before a forced line break is aligned when text align is justify. Text combine upright specifies the combination of multiple characters into the space of a single character. Text decoration specifies the decoration added to text. Text decoration color specifies the color of the text decoration. Text decoration line specifies the type of line in a text decoration. Text decoration style specifies the style of the line in a text decoration. Text indent specifies the indentation of the first line in a text block. Text justify specifies the justification method used when text align is justify. Text orientation defines the orientation of the text in a line. Text overflow specifies what should happen when text overflows the containing element. Text shadow adds shadow to text. Text transform controls the capitalization of text. Text underline position specifies the position of the underline which is set using the text decoration property. Top specifies the top position of a positioned element. Transform applies a 2D or 3D transformation to an element. Transform origin allows you to change the position on transformed elements. Transform style specifies how nested elements are rendered in 3D space. Transition a shorthand property for all the transition * properties. Transition delay specifies when the transition effect will start. Transition duration specifies how many seconds or milliseconds a transition effect takes to complete. Transition property specifies the name of the CSS property the transition effect is for. Transition timing function specifies the speed curve of the transition effect. Unicode BD used together with the direction property to set or return whether the text should be overridden to support multiple languages in the same document. User select specifies whether the text of an element can be selected. Vertical align sets the vertical alignment of an element. Visibility specifies whether or not an element is visible. White space specifies how white space inside an element is handled. Widows sets the minimum number of lines that must be left at the top of a page when a page break occurs inside an element. Width sets the width of an element. Word break specifies how words should break when reaching the end of a line. Word spacing increases or decreases the space between words in a text. Word wrap allows long, unbreakable words to be broken and wrapped to the next line. Writing mode specifies whether lines of text are laid out horizontally or vertically. Z-index sets the stack order of a positioned element.
I think it's interesting to reflect upon how many we actually use. You know, I suppose that's the eloquence of CSS and front-end development, right? Is typically there's a lot of tags, there's a lot of CSS that is going to fall by the wayside, I think. Like, there's just stuff that you're typically going to implement very, very frequently, and there's stuff that you're not. But I think it's cool and it's kind of interesting to just be able to at least go over the entire comprehensive thing. Just because you might be able to memorize some of it. I mean, like that's if we can just commit a little bit to memory, then it'll perhaps improve the quality of our development product here. So
JavaScript array reference. Array properties. Property. Description. Constructor. Returns the function that created the array object's prototype. Length. Sets or returns the number of elements in an array. Prototype. Allows you to add properties and methods to an array object. Array methods. Method. Description. Concat. Joins two or more arrays, and returns a copy of the joined arrays. Copy within. Copies array elements within the array, to and from specified positions. Entries. Returns a key or value pair array iteration object. Every. Checks if every element in an array pass a test. Fill. Fill the elements in an array with a static value. Filter. Creates a new array with every element in an array that pass a test. Find. Returns the value of the first element in an array that pass a test. Find index. Returns the index of the first element in an array that pass a test. For each. Calls a function for each array element. From. Creates an array from an object. Includes. Check if an array contains the specified element. Index of. Search the array for an element and returns its position. IsArray. Checks whether an object is an array. Join. Joins all elements of an array into a string. Keys. Returns an array iteration object, containing the keys of the original array. Last index of. Search the array for an element, starting at the end, and returns its position. Map. Creates a new array with the result of calling a function for each array element. Pop. Removes the last element of an array, and returns that element. Push. Adds new elements to the end of an array, and returns the new length. Reduce. Reduce the values of an array to a single value, going left to right. Reduce right. Reduce the values of an array to a single value, going right to left. Reverse. Reverses the order of the elements in an array. Shift. Removes the first element of an array, and returns that element. Slice. Selects a part of an array, and returns the new array. Sum. Checks if any of the elements in an array pass a test. Sort. Sorts the elements of an array. Splice. Adds, removes elements from an array. To string. Converts an array to a string, and returns the result. Unshift. Adds new elements to the beginning of an array, and returns the new length. Value of. Returns the primitive value of an array.
So obviously it would take a long time to delve really deeply into each one of these. But I think if anybody should be that dedicated, that's what I'm talking about. It's like you delve deeply and then like actually try to use it. I'm sure there's a lot of developers that have done that have tried to use every single tag that is not deprecated. And yeah, see what happens. But I think naturally you're going to figure out what is superfluous and what is actually essential in doing that. So, is there just a function list? Is there a JavaScript function list? JavaScript references? An entire one. Anywho, we could go onto Python. Oh, we get a Python function list. Yeah, we'll just do that, and then we're gonna hop over and just take a look at the news for the day. Are we already ready here? Okay, so all built-in functions, all Python built-in functions, and then we're out. That's gonna be enough for the day.
Python built-in function description abs returns the absolute value of a number. All returns true if all items in an iterable object are true. Any returns true if any item in an iterable object is true. ASCII returns a readable version of an object. Replaces non-ASCII characters with escape character. Bin returns the binary version of a number. Bool returns the Boolean value of the specified object. Byte array returns an array of bytes. Bytes returns a bytes object. Callable returns true if the specified object is callable, otherwise false. CHR returns a character from the specified Unicode code. Class method converts a method into a class method. Compile returns the specified source as an object, ready to be executed. Complex returns a complex number. Delater deletes the specified attribute, property or method from the specified object. Dict returns a dictionary, array. dir returns a list of the specified object's properties and methods. Divmod returns the quotient and the remainder when argument 1 is divided by argument 2. Enumerate takes a collection, e.g. a tuple, and returns it as an enumerate object. Eval evaluates and executes an expression. Exec executes the specified code or object. Filter use a filter function to exclude items in an iterable object. Float returns a floating point number. Format formats a specified value. Frozen set returns a frozen set object. Gettata returns the value of the specified attribute, property or method. Globals returns the current global symbol table as a dictionary. Hazata returns true if the specified object has the specified attribute, property, method. Hash returns the hash value of a specified object. Help executes the built-in help system. Hex converts a number into a hexadecimal value. ID returns the ID of an object. Input allowing user input. Int returns an integer number. IceInstance returns true if a specified object is an instance of a specified object. ISUBclass returns true if a specified class is a subclass of a specified object. Iter returns an iterator object. Len returns the length of an object. List returns a list. Locals returns an updated dictionary of the current local symbol table. Map returns the specified iterator with the specified function applied to each item. Max returns the largest item in an iterable. MemReview returns a memory view object. Minute returns the smallest item in an iterable. Next returns the next item in an iterable. Object returns a new object. October converts a number into an octal. Open opens a file and returns a file object. Ord convert an integer representing the Unicode of the specified character. POW returns the value of x to the power of y. Print prints to the standard output device. Property gets, sets, deletes a property. Range returns a sequence of numbers, starting from 0 and increments by 1, by default. Repr returns a readable version of an object. Reversed returns a reversed iterator. Round rounds are numbers. Set returns a new set object. Setatter sets an attribute, property, method of an object. Slice returns a slice object. Sorted returns a sorted list. AtStatic method converts a method into a static method. Str returns a string object. Sum sums the items of an iterator. Super returns an object that represents the parent class. Tuple returns a tuple. Type returns the type of an object. Vars returns the underscore underscore dict underscore underscore property of an object. Zip returns an iterator from two or more iterators.
So
Previous next.
obviously,
Advertisement. Color picker.
obviously, we got to give max amounts of respect to W3C, because you know, I've investigated other sources for good info, but I just really think the way that information is presented and organized and accessible and implementable through W3C is unparalleled. Unparalleled. W3C is, I love you people. I really think you just do such a good job of doing it the way that it should be done. You know what I mean? And I'd say Code Academy. Secondly to that, there's the YouTube channel for Code Bootcamp, which is pretty good. I like those. Oh, and I would give max amounts of respect to Design Code. I was listening to Brian Jung just the crypto thing, but this guy, Design Code, I just want to give this guy, because I think he does a great job. This guy, Design Code. Awesome tutorials on here. Yeah, let's just take a look. Take a look at the travesty here. Take a look at the whole rigmarole. Daily change, the change on the 24-hour period. Gitcoin. Ooh, Gitcoin. New Gitcoin. Oh, that's it's an ICO. We got a Gitcoin ICO, baby. Let's see what the site looks like. It's nice. I like the color scheme and layout. It's nice. Looks good. Prima facie. Yeah, I'll let's look into these bros. Okay, so it's an Ethereum based. I did buy a little bit. Well, I did between. I bought a little bit of Dogecoin when it first got available through Coinbase, but again, I mean, like ICP has gone down even further. It's gone down another $10. But it's not the short term that I'm talking about. I mean, I think I'm gonna read the book Flash Boys, because when it comes to high frequency and like generating substantial quick returns, I think like that's ultimately that's what we're trying to accomplish, is the exponential aggregation exponential growth. But that's the risk, baby. So nobody likes too much risk, you know?
Bitcoin miners lock in privacy-focused Taproot upgrade. Miners have activated a major upgrade to the Bitcoin protocol. On Saturday afternoon, they finally locked in the requisite number of blocks to lock in the Taproot upgrade, a protocol that obscures complicated transactions and lowers transaction fees. As it stands, pre-Taproot, complex Bitcoin transactions add a lot of code to the ledger and are easily identifiable. This makes it easier to track the flow of money, unnecessarily bulks out the blockchain, and hikes up transaction fees. Not ideal for a privacy-focused payments network that's short on space. Taproot mushes complex transactions together with simple ones, making it difficult to identify the provenance of specific transactions.
Check. So, I just wanted to also mention that as far as the reader is concerned, the reader that I'm using, Microsoft does it best. Like, if I compare the specific nature of the text reading functions of other browsers, be it Opera or Chrome or whatnot, I tend to use Chrome if I'm going to be doing HTML, CSS, JavaScript APIs development. I think they're not on a Mac. If I'm using a Mac, I usually use both Safari and Chrome. And if I'm using a Windows, it took me a long time to switch to Edge, but now that I switched to Edge, like the new Edge does it better, in my opinion. If you're using a Microsoft system, you might as well use the Microsoft browser. I think they put a lot into that. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for the AI or the I never use Cortana. I've never it like didn't want to work in Canada. I have good experiences with Siri, like pretty decent experiences with Siri, but like, yeah, I mean that was just on my head. That was just on the top of my brain because the reader in Edge, in Microsoft Edge, is the best there is, and like I wouldn't be able to get away with this if it wasn't done the way that it is. It's the only reader that offers me what I was actually looking for so long. Like other readers, it just doesn't work as well. So props to the Microsoft developers. You guys, you did it well with Edge. This new Edge kicks ass. I prefer it to Chrome, but I used to be on Chrome alone.
Transactions while scrimping on data. This also lowers transaction costs for complicated transactions. To implement the upgrade, 90% of mined blocks during a 2-week window must contain a signal that they support the upgrade. Today, the network hit that threshold. Taproot will now go live in November. Bitcoin. What is Taproot? The upgrade, proposed in 2018 by Bitcoin Core developer Gregory Maxwell, is widely considered to be one of the most important upgrades to the Bitcoin blockchain in several years. The last major upgrade was the Segregated Witness (SegWit) upgrade in 2017, which removed some transaction data to allow blocks to handle more transactions. You can tokenize a building in State Street's new digital push. State Street Corporation, one of the world's largest money managers, is moving hundreds of its staff into a new digital unit to meet surging interest in everything from cryptocurrencies to transforming investments as traditional as real estate. This technology is revolutionary and it will change the world, said Nadine Chaka, the newly appointed head of State Street Digital, in an interview Friday. Blockchain has been a solution looking for a problem for years now, but what you're starting to see is it's getting real. There's real use cases, she said. The HE Group, which starts off with 400 to 450 staff, is gearing up a series of products and services, including cryptocurrency trading software and support for tokenized assets, Chaka said. Tokenization refers to establishing a digital share of ownership that can be more easily traded and opens up an asset potentially to a wider universe of investors. You can tokenize a building, you can trade a fraction of it without selling a whole building, Chaka said. There are all new ways of unlocking liquidity, she said, adding that State Street created the unit after the intensity of outreach from clients increased. The move to expand digital offerings comes amid a period of volatility in cryptocurrencies and increasing concern among regulators about their use for illicit purposes. Matt Levine's money stuff is what's missing from your inbox. We know you're busy. Let Bloomberg Opinion's Matt Levine unpack all the walls.
Okay, I just wanted to say with regard to like tokenizing a building, that's exactly what I've been trying to do for like a long time. I think like the one major thing that I'm trying to achieve is innovation and development in terms of real estate development as well as technology development. But like I am not aware of it being done, but like risk management and risk distribution amongst investors can be managed through crowdsourcing things in an innovative way that wouldn't traditionally be crowdsourced. And then the balance always exists between policy, government policy, and the will to power and innovation on behalf of the private sector. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that stand up to the test of logic and intellectual scrutiny that the government still attacks, still prevents us from pursuing, especially where I live here. So anyway, okay, let's just one more time at the Daily Movers. All right, Gitcoin. The site looks good. I don't know. Look deeply into Gitcoin. It's an Ethereum-based token. If it's Ethereum-based, I don't know. I already own some Ethereum. I'm not too into all of the Ethereum-based tokens. In fact, like that's why I like ICP, is because it's its own independent entity. AMP, new, all of these new coins. Enzyme, which I guess it's a little bit older, but it says it's new. It's newly available on Coinbase. And what's up? Ampleforth, which is still overall it's pretty low. So I suppose I'll just do one more thing. If I can get this open here, I'm waiting for the application to open so I can switch over. Here I'm doing window capture, so I gotta manually transition it now. So the one thing that I would mention is that, I mean, like this render, there you go. The topo before wasn't loading. I thought I deleted it, but the topo, I was lucky. I was able to salvage it, or I had moved it, and I thought I had deleted it. But yeah, it's like a general, like I gotta get the lighting and the HDRI and the rest of the thing done. But this is like concept one as a basic massing and color scheme, I guess, but like I would go a little bit lighter. So I need to work on the materials here, which is what I'm going to do. But it's difficult for me to, I don't know, I feel self-conscious when I'm modeling, right? So like, yeah, that's all for now. Get at me. Much love.